right, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode with another amazing guest to the Power of Progress podcast. Before we get started, don't forget, if you like this episode or other episodes for that matter, don't forget to give the show a 5-star review, follow it, share it, do all those amazing things so that more people like you can get this content. But today we have an amazing guest. Patrick is joining the show, and Patrick is a videographer and editor based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Outside of his production work, he hosts the podcast Self-Control: How to Build a Better Life. Having overcome numerous addictions and bad habits, as well as depression, anxiety, Patrick shares his experiences in mindset and mental health improvement with his listeners and gives them useful tools to add to their self-development journey. Patrick, thank you for joining the show.
Hey, Scott, man, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here. Happy to hopefully find some new listeners for myself, but also just get the juices flowing with you and chat, get some ideas going.
Oh, for sure. They're going to love you and your message. I mean, I loved it. So you convinced me. So I think you'll convince a handful of other people. I think the first thing is, like, you're a videographer, editor, so obviously if anyone has an issue with how this looks today, blame him, not me, because I'm not the expert. So but how'd you get in? How do you go from videographer to personal development? Okay. Like what's that about?
Yeah. You know what? Day one of my career, I didn't realize how great this was, but I was not hired as an employee by this production company, but I was contracted. So I began a freelance career, and I have not looked back. And it's really been a 10-year career of freelance work and what you might consider entrepreneurship. And so I really think that having that entrepreneurship mindset where you have to always be sort of looking for your next meal, right? Looking for the next client, the next opportunity, really fed into being, I need to be the best I can be to live this life, because it's not easy, right? There's no easy money. And I mean, you own a business, you run your own show, you got to be your best, and the results you get are proportionate to the work that you do. So self-development became something I was doing, and then maybe 2 or 3 years into it, I realized, okay, there's some stuff here, there's some ideas here I want to talk about.
Okay. So, in the intro, obviously you struggled with some things which probably helped you kind of get into this field, whether it's depression, anxiety, and more things like that. So what were some of the things that you learned kind of coming out the other end that people who are suffering right now can maybe use to help overcome it?
Yeah, I think if you're dealing with any kind of bad habit, like I always say, if we're talking about hardcore addiction, I don't know that I can help you. Like heroin, you're drinking 40 of vodka a day, I can't help you. But if we're talking bad habits like procrastination, maybe marijuana, maybe you're not eating well, you're lazy, the number one thing I've learned truly is that you have to examine that problem very, very deeply. It's not enough to just say, I'm a pothead and that's how I am, but I know it's screwing up this side of my life. The fact that you've chose marijuana, or the fact that you've chose alcohol or overeating, will illustrate to you what the problem is in your psyche, in your mindset specifically. That's number one, is don't rush to just quit or rush to not think about it, but rush to examine the problem very deeply.
So when you say examine the problem, so people are hearing you, right? They might have something going on, and you hit a couple of those points. So how does someone examine? I know I have my ways. How does someone examine themselves deeply to realize they actually have something going on they have to fix?
Right. Well, I'd love to hear your ways, but I think number one for me is to start keeping a daily journal. You got to be writing. Somebody much wiser than me said that writing is the highest form of thinking. So when we're writing constantly and consistently, we're saying and we're communicating things that we don't necessarily know we know, or know that we have in our mind. So anybody listening, and you might say, well, I'm not a good writer. It's like, well, it's because you don't write. If you enjoy writing, you'll write all the time. Sit down every day, pen and paper, and just write. And you say, what do I write? It's like, well, that's a larger conversation, but journaling has been the number one thing that has changed my life. It's actually 5 years of journaling this month for me. And I can't imagine where I would be without that.
That is I think you missed such a profound thing you just said, which was amazing. And I haven't heard that in a very long time.
Sure.
Someone tells you that I'm not a good writer, and your answer was, it's because you don't write. And I think people totally don't understand. Like, of course you're not good at something you don't do. And like maybe you were bad at it in grade school. That's not the same thing. Like that's totally different. I'm bad because I eat at night. I'm bad at this. I'm bad. Well, you're only bad because you don't do it the way you just don't do it enough. So if you do it over and over again, you're going to get good at it. You're going to get better at it. I just think that was very profound. And I think I don't want people to miss that because that was awesome. I love that.
Well, it's true. And you have to be, by the same token, you have to be okay with realizing that I'm going to start something and it's going to start badly. Like I know someday I'm going to start martial arts, and that's going to mean that a 12-year-old beats me up. It's not, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, but we have to be okay with the shitty phase. Like I looked at my journal from 5 years ago. My writing was sloppy. I was leaving out details. I was being quick. I was ignoring things, to where now I'm proud to say my journal, the printing is nice and neat. And I'm brutally honest with like, here's where I messed up today. Here's where I let myself down, etc. So of course it's a process, and yeah, the first day is going to suck, but day 1500 down the road, you're going to be a master, or, becoming a master.
Let's say someone says, okay, look, I get it. Journaling is important. And by the way, I personally, I do agree with this from that field. And when you write things down, not only just from a cathartic release standpoint, when you write it down, it does feel better. It empties your mind. It really, instead of holding everything up here and you're just, imagine holding 100 thoughts in your mind and they're all just bouncing off each other all day. That's what that's like. But the second you write one thing down, it becomes 99 and then 98 and then 97. And eventually the things that are there, it's like 5 or 6. And now those things are kind of just, they can't bounce off anything. And now it's a lot more calm in your mind. So if you feel anxiety, if you feel stress, like I used to do all the time and still do, but to a lesser degree, if you write things down, it becomes so much quieter in your head, and you're able to actually focus on what you want to do. And and then you can see it, you can quantify what you wrote down. So I think it's an amazing process for sure.
Oh, 100%. You said it very well. It allows you to quantify your life. Like suddenly now you have all these thoughts in your head, and now they're out on the page and you can read them and you can think, well, those are all very stupid thoughts, or there's 10 terrible thoughts and one good one. Next to that, it's like now you can start to the beauty of journaling to me is reading back 3 months of your life like a story. And you can start to see all the mistakes you made, or look, every day I'm eating late at night, or every day I do this and then it causes me to skip the gym, or every day I do this and I go out and I'm shit with women at the bar, whatever. Hey, I don't know anything about that. But the problem reveals itself. And that's, I guess, what I was saying earlier is like, to deeply examine the problem requires the repetition of daily observation of your life.
Daily observation of your life. Huge key there. What would be, if you had to pick one more thing that people can do to start getting out of this anxiety, procrastination? Again, we're not really talking about specific medical things, but things that are stopping you from achieving your goals. So writing is number one. What would be number 2 on your list? They're like, hey, you got to start doing this.
Move, physically move, right? Like, I know you're a big fitness guy, you know this. I'm not going to be the guy that goes lift weights, because hey, maybe lifting weights isn't for everybody. Yoga, walking, even meditation, prayer, stretching. I heard from, again, someone much wiser, you probably know, Andrew Huberman. Dr. Andrew Huberman. And he said, half of our brain is the circuits for vision and motion. That's half of our life, is vision and motion, what you see, and then your ability to move. So if your life isn't going anywhere, and again, I'm no great guru, I'm not perfect, but if you want to progress in your life, you have to physically move daily, multiple times a day, right? I mean, you could say more about it than me as a fitness guy. That motion, that gets the body, that gets the spirit going, that gets our desire to live life going. You got to move. You got to use the body you have.
100%. I mean, in the studies and in the data behind moving, just literally taking a 20-minute like intent walk every day, and it decreases your chance for long-term illness by just a dramatic percentage. So I mean, moving itself, I can imagine, like if you're having a bad day and you go out for a walk and you come back and you quantify your results. Okay, before I went for the walk, you felt like a 1, and now you feel like an 8, like on how good you feel. Like that's a real thing. And so moving, I love that you said moving. I wasn't expecting it actually. So that's pretty nice.
Well, hey, there you go. I'm full of surprises. I guess I started doing yoga just a few days ago, and I really think it's changed my life in just 3 days, 10, 15 minutes a day.
What about it? Do you, like specifically, is it just the moving, or is it the breathing? What about it?
it's both of those things, right? Like it's the way that the breathing combines with the stretch. And it seems like, and I did an episode of my podcast on this recently about how physical, or I should say, mental stress causes physical tension in the body and vice versa. And yoga and weightlifting and stretching are all ways to release that physical tension. And we can think ourselves into physical tension, and we can give ourselves mental problems by holding or having a tense body. So I think yoga is like this, those deep exhales, man. That is something evil leaving your body, as far as I can tell.
I love it. I agree with you 100%. I think that we carry so much mental baggage with us that it definitely manifests physically. And I think the
Yes.
release again, I'm not a big yoga person, so I'll be honest. I've
No
had a
worries.
hard time getting into yoga, and it's one of those things I need to get into a little more, or at least more stretching. But the
Mm,
more you do it, the better you definitely feel. And it kind of goes along with the movement and the writing aspect of it. So you're big on goal setting. Why is goal setting? I preach this, so people know my thoughts on
sure.
it. They know exactly what I want them to do. Why is goal setting important to you?
Well, I think you, that's a great question. And that's what people say when they don't have an answer. Great question. I think to me, it's like, I once drew a picture of, imagine like a Pac-Man, Pac-Man, waka, waka, waka. And he's eating the dots, whatever. He's eating his food and he's going up, but his eyes are also focused on where he's going. So I think that so much of goal setting has to be short, attainable bites, right? And
Mm.
but of course, you should have a 10-year plan for your life if you'd like to do that. But I guess goal setting is important because it sets us on a trajectory, like literally minute to minute. Like the conventional wisdom, I guess, is to say, what do I want a year from now? What do I have to do every hour to get there? And that's that sort of waka, 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 like eating those small bite-sized goals. So I don't see a life for myself where I don't have at least a rough idea of where the hell I'm going day to day. And those are goals. Like people might say goals. It's like, oh, I want to, start a business. I want to become a stand-up comedian. I want to bang, however many women. I don't talk like that, but some guys do.
Or men, either
Or
way.
men.
So,
Hey, we
yeah.
don't discriminate on this show. But that's great. But I also think that a goal could be like, look, I want to get up and I want to plan my meals for the day, and then I want to follow that plan. It can be that simple. I just think it's a way of looking at life where we have an objective and we have our vision fixed on that objective and we go to it all the time.
So would you say in your experience then, if someone, if the how clear does the
Mhm.
goal have to be? Because I find that a
Right.
lot of people, like for example, Forbes came out a couple of years ago and basically said that the number one reason people failed their New Year's resolutions for
Mm.
fitness goals was because they were not specific enough in their goal. So they had a goal: I want to lose weight, I want more energy, I want to feel better, I want to have a sick, whatever
Sure.
it was, and they weren't specific enough on their goal. So do you have, I mean, there's SMART goals, obviously, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely. Do you
Mm.
have a specific model that you use, or is it mostly just getting as detailed as possible so that you can keep biting each thing in front of you and just keep moving forward until you eat all the food out there?
Hmm. Yeah, as far as a model, I think maybe I may be guilty of not having a ton of goals. It may be that I just have a few goals that I work on every day, and there's kind of a general overarching, like I mentioned, I'm a freelancer, I'm self-employed. My goal is to maintain that as long as I can, to
Mm.
never have that steady 9 to 5 job. Well, under that umbrella is hundreds of things that I have to do every day that I'm just kind of doing automatically. So perhaps I could do a bit more self introspection on my specific goals, but there is something about the process of living every day that sort of informs these larger goals. I don't necessarily have a specific model for people, but maybe one thing I'd say to you if you're struggling with goal setting is quite often we look at the next person and we say, I want to be like that. What workout do I have to do to look like Scott? What do I have to do to start a podcast like Patrick? Well, that's what I would call relational thinking, where we're now
Mm.
relating ourselves to something else. And to me, it's like, it's natural, it's fine, but maybe take a moment and think about, what are you basing your goals on and why do you want to get where you want to go? Be real honest about what it is you want and why you want it. Because the problem of desire is that we desire what we don't have. Okay, well,
Mhm.
let's maybe start on the basis of what we do have and build off that. So now I've spoken about that on my podcast and people can find it. There's an episode called Refresh Yourself. This is the most important thing I've ever said on this podcast. People can find that 7 minutes. I'll go into that. But to me, it really, the goal setting has to come home to what do I want for myself? I'm not so concerned about the outside world. And without getting too rambly, I just don't rush to change, rush to understand yourself first.
Gosh, there's a lot to unpack in there. One thing that kind of struck me, and I think may have struck some other people, is that you have a goal that to not to be 9 to 5, right? You want to do your
Mhm,
own thing, you want to be self-employed. Inherently,
mhm.
being self-employed has a timetable on it, or it has a urgency
Sure.
to it where like you are urgent. And so what I tend to see is that urgency supersedes the need to be like this calculated smart goal kind of person. And
Mhm,
like you got to eat, you got to pay bills, where I
mhm,
got to figure something out today and I got to go and
mhm.
I got to move.
Right.
Most people, when it comes to they want to lose 40 pounds, they
Sure.
want to start a new habit of journaling, they want to get a raise at work, whatever it might be, they don't have necessarily that urgency. They have a bad day, so what? No big deal. If you have a bad
Mm.
day, you might not be eating next week, and
Right.
so
Right.
that's the real world of most people who work for themselves. And so, how does someone who inherently like, for example, like if I want to lose 10 pounds, I can say, I can have a goal, I can map it all out, but
Sure.
there might not be urgency. How do I create urgency with the
Mm.
goal that I have, so that I can start doing what you're doing? And I think you're living proof that you don't need necessarily the specific goal, but you created urgency. So I think you do need
Mm.
one or the other. How does someone create urgency in a necessarily a non-urgent way?
Hmm. That's very interesting. It's nice. It's nice to be observed by somebody and have them tell you things that you didn't know about yourself. I guess maybe I am living a bit of an urgent lifestyle in a way, which is fine. I can handle it, I guess. But there is stress and anxiety. But I guess maybe if you're listening to this and you feel like I need a kick in the ass, or I'm inherently sort of lazy or slow moving. One thing that came to mind was, the universe is gigantic, right? Like it's the biggest thing we can comprehend in our mind. And you're saying that you want to make an impact on that, right? Like you're saying, I want to make an impact on the universe in some small way, even if that impact is just proportionate to my size. That's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work. You have to at some point just accept that. I don't want to say life is work, but I want to say the impact that you make on the lives of others or the change that you make for yourself is proportionate to the effort you put in. So fine by me and fine by you if you want to sit on your ass and do nothing with your life, and you want to take the easy route and you want to work the 9 to 5 and you want to take the salary and go into retirement. Like there's no judgment. But if you believe there's more for you, it takes that extra amount of effort to get there. And I'm not like some superhuman. I'm not some superman, but what I've learned is that, God, if we want to make a difference in our life, that it's bigger maybe than we think, and it takes more than we think, and it takes longer to actually understand what it takes. So just don't stop. Make every day count, as a very famous hockey player said the other day.
There's a quote out there. I think it's by well, I think he repurposed the quote, but Alex Hermosi,
Mm,
and he's a brilliant guy. So if you are familiar with him, you should go look him up. But he said something basically like, in this, to create urgency, kind of like you said, to do what's required, it takes a lot. It takes a big
mm,
impact. And what you said kind of reminded me that he mentioned like, okay, hey, who here wants to make like $1 million? Okay. And it's like, well, how much can you make right now? Okay, I can make 50 grand. Okay, so basically what you're saying is every year you're making 50 grand, you're losing $950,000. So the cost of you not knowing how to make $1 million a year is $950,000 a year. And
whoa.
so if you apply that to your goal of, let's say I want to lose 50 pounds, but I don't know how to lose 50 pounds, well, then you are taking that every
Mm,
single year and almost multiplying how much weight you haven't lost. And it's like, wow, that's staggering. I'm just not losing weight over the course of time. Versus if I could learn the skill to do something, then I am creating that. I am lowering the urgency, but I effectively understand that there's an urgency involved, and I'm
Mhm.
pushing myself to do it, because if I don't do it, what's the cost of not doing it? And I can say, from a health perspective, right? The cost of not losing weight if you're morbidly obese is that you're going to die much
Right.
sooner, or you're going to live a much lower quality life than you
Mhm.
probably should be. Again, not guaranteed, but that's the idea. So I like what you said about kind of that, how big of an impact that you have to make. Like, the world's big, and to do something big in your life or to the whole world is going to take some effort, and
Mhm.
that could potentially create urgency in your life.
I like that a lot. I'm just getting into Hormozy a little bit, but he's bang on there, and it's the same thing as you put money in the bank, and because of inflation, your money is shrinking if it's not
Yeah.
growing through investment. You could look at your life the same way. It's like, sure, you're making small strides, but those big strides that you could be
Mm.
making, you're not making them. So you could say that in a sense, you are going backwards in a certain to a certain amount.
Love it. What would you say? So a lot of people listening, like, they might resonate. They understand, like, it's very difficult to get going.
Mhm.
What would you say is like the number one thing that you've seen or coach people or whatever,
Mhm.
that's holding them back from getting started or achieving their goals?
Man, there's a lot of things, right? And I'm not a doctor and I don't coach people per se, but I do think there could be a hormonal problem. Like you could just physiologically not have the ability to get up and go, and that could be a problem with diet, with drugs and alcohol. With I personally think pornography and the behavior that goes along with pornography drains a person of their energy, or just not taking on challenges. Like it could be that your body is just not physiologically geared towards challenge. But beyond that, I think a lot of people just think themselves into that not moving state, or that it's easier to not, right, and a lot of that is rooted in the ego. And I did a series of episodes in August about the ego, and that is really what it does is it focuses on negative attention, and it bombards us with negative attention, and if we've failed or been abused or been hurt in some way, it gives us a reason to not want to move forward, and it leaves us with this belief that we have to sit there and just control everything. And quite often it's easier just to stay put. I would suggest to you that if you're listening and you have problems with procrastination and you have problems with getting going, it may be a bigger problem than you think. I'm sorry to say. I would urge you to check out my episode from August 2nd, where we talk about the ego, and the 3 episodes that followed. But don't realize that you can only do what you can do today. Start that self observation, be very honest with yourself, and consider what you're consuming. You know, it's we don't get a user manual for this body, and we're left to do it ourselves. But I think that's a challenge we should take on. And it's not like it's easy, and it's not going to feel good, but you have to start.
Would you say that the ego um leads to fear inherently? Like, ego leads
Yes.
to fear, and that could be one of the reasons why people don't ever get started, because they fear,
Yes.
they fear failing inherently. Like, I think fear of failure is probably the biggest reason that people don't try, is because they can't fail, or they don't want to fail, and so their ego is causing them not to do something.
I think you're 100% right. I think what I've learned about the ego is that it is our inner storyteller, and it casts us as a character in a story and sort of sees us from the outside. And if you've had negative experiences, like when I was very young, I had a painful experience that required a surgical healing or surgical intervention, and that led to a lifetime of being afraid of the outside world. That's not an uncommon story. How about if you fail in a public speaking engagement? Well, now you're scared of public speaking, but you may still have to do it. So now there's coping mechanisms that go along with it. That fear is based in trying to keep us safe. Uh, it's a huge process, but again, it's beginning to understand that the ego is just one part of our consciousness that's trying to keep us safe, but that prevents the growth, right? That we're talking about here.
What would be like a couple, one or two things that people can use to start overcoming basically their ego?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, number one, check out my episode from August 2nd. But if you don't want to do that, I think number one is practice awareness in your life, and that can come from simply just being mindful of your thoughts, right? A lot of times we just cruise through life without thinking about what we're thinking, and that can often mean that we end up thinking a bunch of shit and driving ourselves into a negative headspace because of what I'm thinking. So Definitely look up the concept of mindfulness and begin to work on sort of awareness of what you're thinking. And you can then, of course, I would obviously advocate journaling at this point, right? And start to write those thoughts out and then see them and think, look, every morning I get up and I sit on the edge of bed and I think, I don't want to do this. Okay, well, are you aware that you've been doing that for a year? Or are you aware that you've been putting off this hard conversation for 5 years? And I do think that when you start to see your life in that scope, it has to start, the wheels turning, right? And towards some progress. I think that so often we live in this mindless state, and we're invited to live in a mindless state through social media and all this easy distraction and cheap food and take the easy way out. Hey, I've fallen victim to it myself. The invitation here, if you want better, is to start thinking about what you're thinking and observing yourself.
Awesome. So observing yourself, kind of reflecting on your thoughts. Number one, what would be like number two?
Yeah, good question. I thought I got three there. No,
Oh, okay.
no. Yeah, definitely start. But then, okay, then it goes to the body, right? And start to come home to the body, stretching, weightlifting, pushing your body, moving. I mean, I sometimes feel like on my show, I repeat myself because as far as I can see, it always comes back to a lot of the same things, but start to put the body to work. And then to me, it's about rejoining the mind and body. We live in this mindless world. We're unaware of what's going on in our body and in our mind. Start to come home to the body. Start to observe the body just as you observe the mind. And if any of this seems woo woo and out to lunch, just go for a walk and try not to think too much and see if you can do that 10 minutes a day.
Love that. Do you have any advice from your past experiences with kind of going through this and kind of coming out the other end and creating your own show with someone who, like, if they want to get started with something, they want to achieve a goal they've never done before, like you never did podcasting before.
Right.
By the way, it's much harder to get started than people actually think. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of mental barriers to overcome, let
Yes.
alone technical barriers. But what would be like a piece of advice that you could give someone to start building confidence in
Mm,
themselves, that so that they can start seeing at least a tiny iota of social proof that they can do
sure.
something?
I think first and foremost is like confidence has to come from within, right? And as we were saying, it's like, yeah, it's not easy to start, but you can also say, no one's gonna read your journal. No one's gonna watch the first 50 episodes of your podcast. So you might as well just do it anyway. And through those processes of whether it's podcasting, whether it's, I don't know, approaching women at the bar more regularly. I don't know why I keep going back to that. I'm in a long-term relationship. Whether it's going to the gym and having a weightlifting routine for yourself or pursuing music, pursuing photography, you have to just start. And what comes through the doing is that development of your own personal qualities. And I guess what I would say is that I have found that people trust and people gravitate towards someone who is working on themselves. So people say, well, I have no confidence. It's like, well, what how much trust and how much love do you have for yourself? First of all, like, are you even somebody that can go out in the world and make people trust you, make people believe in you? And so rather than framing it as how people see you, I would try and frame it as how you see yourself. Pursue those things that you find meaningful. Try, fail, start the thing and don't worry about how bad it's going to be. It's about developing your personality and your qualities. And I guess what I'd say is the more you know about yourself and the more trust you have in yourself, the less the opinions of other people are going to matter. And then you can go freely into the world confidently.
Awesome. I love it. I mean, that's perfectly well said. I don't think I need to add anything to that.
Sure.
That's pretty good. I mean, I like it.
Okay.
Where can people find you if they want to learn more about everything?
I think number one is just, jump on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and just look for the show Self Control, How to Build a Better Life. Um, I try and do episodes 2 or 3 times a week. If you like video content, check out the YouTube channel. It's under the same name. I'm sure you'll post the links in all of this. My call to action is message me directly on Facebook Messenger. And that might be a dangerous thing to do, but I want to hear from you. If you've been watching the podcast, if you're familiar with my work, send me a message and let's talk. And that window might close someday, but right now I'm an open window for people who want to jump in and and tell me what they think. So I'm out there.
I love it. Any final thoughts for the audience?
Oh man, another great question. I guess see, I had a quote in mind that I lost. Maybe it was Marcus Aurelius who said something like, and I'm going to butcher it, so maybe you can help me out. But it was something like, the gist of it was, however we are internally, that's how the times are, right? We look around and say, oh, the times are bad, right? Look at Joe Biden, look at Justin Trudeau, look at the economy, look at Ukraine. Yes, there's all bad out there in the world, but those, it's not necessarily a reflection of you as a person. If you find yourself worried about the outside world, come home to yourself, to your own mind, to your own body, and do all the things that I talk about, that Scott talks about, and deal with your own body and your own mind first, and come home. Just come home to the self.
Mm. Powerful last message. Patrick, I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate it, man.